Welcome to the Boise Business Podcast, Episode 7, where we interview local business leaders and get their real-world feedback and their processes on how they run their business. I'm your host, Reese Phillips, and with me today is Mac Wrigley, Director of Property Services at HomeRiver Group. This episode is sponsored by Preferred Senior Benefits, where seniors turn to understand their Medicare health insurance needs. Mac, can you hear me?
I can.
I really struggled with not saying "the" in front of the HomeRiver Group there. Did you catch that?
It feels like it's supposed to be there. I get it.
Well, Mac, thank you for being on the show. Me and Mac have known each other for a long time. We're both ex-bankers.
That's right.
So we have that in common. And as you can probably tell by our conversation, we love talking, or at least I do, and maybe Mac does as well.
A little bit.
Well, we're excited to have you on the show. Obviously you running a property management group, that's some of my background as well. So I'm really excited to have this banter and this conversation. Before I throw it over to you for a real quick bio, just give a real general overview to our listeners about our process here. Basically, everyone, we're going to ask Mac between 3 to 5 major questions with a few follow-up questions in between those. And our goal with this is to be able to get all the information from him that you're looking for to really understand the business that he's in and get the advice that he's willing to give with us. So with that being said, Mac, I'm going to turn it over to you for a quick bio.
Yeah, you bet. I appreciate you having me on. I'm a Boise native, born and raised, and went to high school here and attended Boise State University. I did my undergrad in business economics and then a master's of business administration as well, both from Boise State. And I've actually spent my entire career up until the last few years in the banking industry, much like you. It's kind of ironic that we both have a banking and property management background. So
it is. It's very true.
Not many of us around, I'm sure, but most of my career in banking, working with contractors. And I also spent about 10 years teaching college courses. Started out, just adjunct, very part-time, and then got to the point where I was teaching 10 or 11 classes a year, both through University of Phoenix and then through College of Western Idaho, CWI. Just various, economics or marketing, just business management, those types of things. And really enjoy doing that. It's more of a hobby, labor of love, being an adjunct faculty. You're not going to really make a career of it where you're going to be able to live off the meager paycheck that it provides, but it's more scratching that itch if you enjoy giving back and teaching in the community. It was a lot of fun, and it also makes you relearn those things you learned in business school and going back and getting stronger in some of those things. So that was positive. And then a few years ago, I made the switch to property management, and here I am.
Okay, so 2 things come up that I have to ask you, Mac. The first one is, between the administration and the economics degrees, which one do you use more in the real world scenarios, whether it be now or in the past?
If I'm saying just real world, everyday type of stuff, in business economics, you take a lot of just general management stuff as well, but obviously in an MBA, that's definitely a piece of it. Business is all about people, so understanding people, and some of the leadership and management courses that I had have really come in handy just to help me kind of navigate different scenarios that come up. Probably a few psychology courses that come up and help you out in the management of individuals. Different people with different personalities react to different scenarios quite drastically, as you are aware. So that stuff has definitely been helpful.
I would definitely agree to that. That's a key statement. I think people don't realize that ultimately business comes down to dealing with people. So that's awesome. Second question, when you decided to jump into the property management space, did anybody tell you you were crazy? Because I know when I did it, I had at least a handful of people tell me that I was making a huge mistake.
I don't know that anyone ever told me I'm crazy, but I usually got the reaction like, oh, kind of like that'll be fun, because it's, banking as you know, is sort of this steady, safe, secure career. And I'd always heard that once you're in it for 15 years, you'll never get out of it. Once I heard that, it's like, well, I've got to be the guy to do it then, So 19 years in, just wanting a change, wanting to do something different. And so when I made that call, my peer group it's a conservative industry, and making that, when you're successful in it, to make a change away from it, it's a head scratcher for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree. And for those that don't know Mac, he was a very, very well-known and successful banker. So when you made that change, it definitely took a lot of us by surprise, but I think it was probably for the best. being able to enjoy a different type of challenge is always good for us senior bankers, as they say. Well, Mac, I'm really excited to get going on these questions so the audience can really get your insight, because you have so much to bring on it. And as you talked about earlier, giving back as an adjunct, hopefully, this can service a little bit of that, scratching that itch, as you called it. So with that being said, I want to jump into the first question. It's pretty straightforward, pretty direct. Why did you make the jump into property management?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. It was sort of by accident. I'd been looking to make a change from banking. I won't say that I was bored necessarily, but it was I kind of knew what I was doing, and it was a matter of, okay, how do I continually do this better and better and acquire more customers, et cetera. But I think ultimately I just needed a new challenge. I needed to try to figure something else out. Banking is also, as you're aware, it's also highly regulated. There's not a lot of ways to screw things up for yourself, because there's a lot of policies and procedures. There's rules in place. There's guide rails everywhere, so it's hard to steer yourself off the road too far. To try something new, you can't really innovate. And I just felt like I wanted to try. I went to business school for a reason. I learned all these things. I'm giving advice to all my clients, and that's one thing. But I wanted to be able to try some of that myself. And so, moving into property management, which is a highly fractured industry. Most companies, are managing, fewer than 500 doors. They're smaller companies, mom and pop shops, and so trying to bring in some of these business principles, not only from my schooling, but as a banker, and this, you're looking at financials of hundreds of companies across, hundreds of industries all the time, and you're talking to business owners. You know why they succeed and why they fail. You get to see their successes and see their failures, and there's a lot of knowledge that comes with that. And so just that need to try to apply that skill and knowledge in a different path was strong for me. So I've been looking for an opportunity, and I was recruited to come to HomeRiver Group and to run the property services division. So I'll explain that. I'm not a property manager, though I'm in the property management industry. I basically run all of our maintenance and construction and our tenant turn. So when a tenant moves out, we do the make ready to get it ready for the next tenant. So it's a lot of, we do 35,000 work orders a year. So it's just a whole lot of work that we do. So it was a matter of coming in and trying to find ways to optimize things and make sure we're making money, and kind of bring that data background that I had into an industry that typically isn't associated with that. Most of what I'm doing now for a property manager is just pain. It's just something they don't want to deal with. They want to just make this go away, have someone fix this for me. And that's the value that I bring. I take the job that no one wants to do, which is, fixing something that's broken. And you think about it, and this with your property management experience. When something breaks inside a rental property, the owner's mad because something's broken. They're going to end up paying to get it fixed, right? Because they own the asset. The tenant's upset because where they live, something's broken, and maybe they're going to have to pay for it. But even if not, they've got to wait for someone to come along and fix it. And in between those two parties is the property management company, trying to provide value to both parties and do it in a way that keeps both sides happy. And that's not always an easy path to try to navigate, and then still be able to make money so that you can cover your overhead and things. So that's kind of the fun world that I stepped into.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I have some real world experience in that, and I'll be the first to tell you it is not fun dealing with those situations. So kudos for you. One thing you brought up that I want to circle back to is you talked about the concept of what you learned when you were getting your MBA and going to school and being a business person. Is there one piece of advice specifically from getting your MBA that you use on a daily basis? I guess advice probably is not a right word, but maybe principle or thought process that you use on a daily basis or weekly basis that people could duplicate in their businesses?
The one that jumps out to me the most actually comes from the field of economics. And it was probably once when I was teaching both micro and macroeconomics, that it really made me realize how much that coursework in my undergrad shaped my worldview and how I look at things. And if you've taken a microeconomics class, that decisions are made on the margin, that you're constantly analyzing. Does it make sense for me to buy one more unit of this, or put one more unit of production towards this end? And in what I'm doing now, that's my daily in and out, is I'm looking at things and trying to make sense of. We have this volume of work orders that we do, And I'm looking at it and trying to see, okay, we've always done it this way, but why? Does it make sense? Does it make economic sense? And really to do that, it's just breaking it down into its components and just saying, okay, what's our cost of input? What's our break-even labor rate? That's probably one that's such a simple concept that you learn in business school that I think in the real world, many companies maybe don't have a full understanding. They understand the concept, maybe haven't taken the time to really calculate that out. And I found this to be true in banking, that a lot of businesses just kind of run by gut and feel and still successful. And the cool thing for me, the interesting thing for me, is to get in there and look at it and try and figure out if those gut instincts, which are often correct, if they really are correct, because sometimes they're not. And sometimes we're doing things the exact opposite way. And the other part of it is that sometimes they are, but with a few extra tweaks, you can generate a whole lot more cash that's just trapped in the business because we're not seeing those ways to free it up.
I think you bring up a good point. My wife is in the trucking business. She runs, she works at a factoring department at truckstop.com here locally. And, she talks about all the time how these carriers, so the people who drive truck, just because their wheels are turning doesn't necessarily correlate to them making money because of the cost of fuel, their time, all that thing. So I think a lot of times most small to medium-sized businesses go through that. So I think that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. And that kind of transitions perfectly to our next question, which is with you managing, 5,000 plus stores and having, was it 5,200 how many work orders was it?
About 35,000 work orders a year that we're navigating.
So 35,000 work orders, 5,000 doors you're managing. What's the best practice or process that you have to do those things efficiently?
For us, it was a number of things. One is, we've got a fleet of internal technicians and we didn't have a lot of data on what they were doing. So the simplest solution there was to put GPS tracking units in each of those vehicles. And the minute we did that, we were able to capture a lot of efficiencies. It also made us look at how we're routing those technicians. So you think of having properties across the Treasure Valley and sending 20 vehicles to go do repairs or tenant turns, whatever that may be. And there were times where I was convinced at the same stoplight, we probably had 3 different trucks, all with our logo on it, heading in different directions. And made me just realize, like, we have guys crisscrossing each other around the valley and just trying to find ways to optimize their routing so that we could minimize window time, minimize drive time. Because that means, for the time that we're sitting in a vehicle, we're not providing value to the owner or to the tenant. And we need those technicians in making repairs to deliver that value to the owner and the tenant. So finding little ways like that. Other ways are, managing vendors better so we get a better scope of the work. So that we're sending them, here's exactly what we need done. There's probably not one magic 8-ball solution to what we did, but it's been 1,000 little things. And often those are little things that we learned because we literally tried every other possible way to do it and finally figured out, hey, maybe we should just do it this way. We found all the wrong ways. We know where all the rocks are. All the mistakes were made, to find the solution we ended up at sometimes.
Yeah, that I think the fact of having so much in front of you as a small to medium-sized business owner or someone building a business or someone running a department like yourself, having so many things you could try and getting kind of overwhelmed, sometimes you just have to go and do it. I know that's what I struggle with. Looking at my calendar, I have 8 million things I could be focusing my time on, but what are the 1 or 2 things, if I accomplish those today, is going to make me successful? So I think you bring up a great point.
It's interesting, if you've read the book, The E-Myth, they talk in that book about being the technician, someone who's good at whatever the craft is, whatever the business is, and working in the business versus working on the business. I think that's always that struggle. And I think there's a scale component that you've got to be able to get to a point where you can invest in either bringing in someone like me to help work on the business or bringing in another technician to work in the business to free yourself up to work on the business. Because if you look at, to borrow from the appraisal world, if you look at like the highest and best use of each employee, you're going to have some employees that have a special gift. And I have a couple of these employees that just have a gift for creating efficiencies or to process improvement. And so a lot of my job is freeing them up to be able to do what they do best and finding ways to allocate that skill and really that talent and putting it to its best use.
And I think, most people don't really understand that statement that you made, which is work versus working in the business, working on the business. Can you maybe elaborate that a little bit more for our audience?
Yeah. So working in the business, like in the E-Myth, the book, the E-Myth, they talk about, I think it's a baker, someone that enjoys baking cookies and breads and that type of thing. And they're very talented, very good at it. And so, but the more and more that they do it, they're making good products, but maybe they're not making any money because they're not actually running the business. They're just so busy being the baker, doing all this. And that's what they know. That's what they love. That's why they wanted to own their own business and doing this. But in the end, they just really wanted to be a baker. They never wanted to be a business owner. Some of the best business people I've seen don't necessarily enjoy the industry. You know, it's not that they're passionate about whatever that industry is, but they're passionate about running a business. And so they can be successful in any industry because they know how to run a business. And you know, I saw this so often with in the banking world, when someone would buy a business and they'd buy a mediocre business, and the reason they wanted to buy this business was they saw all the cash trapped in it. They saw everything that the other owner was not doing that would bring more value, that would generate more revenue, and they'd step in and just manage it differently, and the thing would just spin off cash. So that's the difference between someone who the former owner was working in the business, the new owner is working on the business and can see it from a higher level, you know, 30,000 foot view to really see where the rocks are, where the opportunities are, and avoid those pitfalls. And avoiding pitfalls is just as important as finding new sources of revenue or what strategic alliances, things that might make sense, other products that could help, or other processes to improve.
Yep. And I think the concept of taking a step back and looking at your business as somebody else, like an investor. I know that that's my strategy before I invest in businesses, is take that step out, look at it, and try to see all the negatives. And if you can add value, then why not do those? And I think a lot of times people either don't know how to do that as a business owner, or don't have the time, or don't make the time. I guess make the time is probably a better statement than have the time, right?
So it's almost like you know, meditation is really popular right now. Mindfulness. You know, there's a lot of people that you know, they say mindfulness, which sounds so simple, but it's just people pausing and being intentional about what they're doing, pausing and looking at their life and the decisions they're making, instead of just letting life happen to them, but really be intentional about the decisions that they make, right? It's the same thing to improve the quality of life. And in a business, it can be the same thing. Pause, take a step back, look at it. And oftentimes you see a business doing certain things just because that's how they do it. And nobody knows why. Nobody knows why. And it does generate revenue, but maybe there's a better way. And that, I think that that passionate pursuit of improving processes is huge. Being able to do that, a thousand little changes over 5 years can generate a lot more revenue from a business than trying to just always keep it the same and just do it the way we've always done it.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. You know, both of us being from the banking industry, which is very archaic, for lack of better description, on the way they do things. Obviously, your industry that you're in now, and even mine, you know, in the senior healthcare space, it's been done a certain way for so long. But when I, you know, being somebody that's only been in that space for about 1.5 years, and I asked, well, why do we do it this way? The response 95% of the time is, well, that's how it's done, but why is it done that way? And sometimes when you challenge those things, it's interesting to see people's reactions. Are they working in their business, or they're working on their business when you ask those things? So that's a great point.
It reminds me of a story that I heard once, that it was making a roast, and the mom is teaching the daughter how to make a roast, and she said, okay, now we cut off both ends of the roast, we put it in the pan and put it in the oven and all those types of things. And the daughter asked, well, why do we cut off the ends of the roast? And mom was like, I don't know. That's how grandma taught me. So that's how I've always done it. So well, let's call grandma. So they call grandma and ask grandma, hey, when we make a roast, why are we cutting off the ends of the roast when we're doing this? And grandma explains, well, because the pot I had was never big enough. So we always had to cut off the ends of the roast. You know, you stop and look at the implications of that, of that lost roast, you know, over 2 generations type of thing. There's a lot of lost revenue in businesses out there just doing things the way that they've always been done.
Mac, I promise you, I'm going to use that analogy 100,000 times the rest of my life. Thank you.
It's not mine, so feel free.
Okay,
I'm just passing it along.
That's an awesome piece of advice. And once again, it leads us to our third question. And this you may have already answered it, but you know, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice when you got done with school, whether it be your undergrad or your MBA, of something to do or something not to do moving forward, what would that one piece of advice be?
So it's probably advice that I was given by my dad, and that was to look at every job for 2 things. 1, where will it take you in 5 years? And 2, who's your manager? You know, as I look back on my career, Passing up a job that looks like a great job just because another job I feel would take me to a better spot in the next 5 years, or I could see where I would learn more or grow more. I'm huge on avoiding plateaus. And by that, I mean, I think each of us should be able to look back on our prior selves from a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and be maybe a little bit embarrassed, just in the sense of like, man, I thought I was so smart, or I was so good, in other words, being able to see, hey, I've grown, I've learned something new. I'm not just a one trick pony who's learned one skill and I'm just going to ride that, to the nth degree. And so, the life comes at you fast, the world changes, and continually that endless pursuit of learning new skills and challenging yourself. I think that's what your career has to be full of those little types of things. I think your direct manager matters, who you work for directly. They can have a bigger impact on your job satisfaction than pretty much anyone in the company. So if you don't have a good manager, there's a saying, people don't leave companies, they leave managers. You've got to have a good manager. And if you don't have one, you need to make a change so that you have one. Sometimes that means you're involved in a merger. You in banking, right? There's lots of banking mergers.
Mac, I lost you there. Can you hear me still?
I can still hear you. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. You're back.
Okay.
You cut out. Oh, no, you cut out again.
How about now? I can still hear you fine.
Let's see if it's just.
I can still hear you if you can hear me. Now I can't hear you. Okay, I can hear you now. That good?
Yep. I don't know if it's probably just a lovely internet connection we have going on.
Hey, it could be a little Bluetooth connectivity, I was just talking about how the impact that your direct manager can have on your level of happiness, that being able to choose your manager. So if you're involved in a merger, that direct manager that you have matters a lot. So I would give myself that continued advice that I received early in my career, to pay attention to who your direct manager is, because they're going to have a really big impact. Another one that comes to mind is taking risk and not being afraid to fail. I think that's huge. I think so many of us, and it probably, this is probably going to shape the next generation. If you grew up hearing about the Great Recession, and then now we see the first global recession since World War II, and could possibly be the first global depression since World War II, right? That's going to impact psychologically a lot of young people that are just starting out in their careers. And oftentimes we're biased to what we've experienced or what we've seen. In the face of that, I think it's important to recognize you cannot get ahead unless you're willing to take risks. You've got to be willing to fail and willing to take risks in order to get ahead.
I agree. I think you hit on so many good points. The one that I'm going to just echo is, when you're getting out of school and you're young and you don't have a family or mortgages or things like that, it's a time to fail and fail fast and figure it out, because you don't want to get stuck in a situation where you can't, or you feel like you can't, because the pressure can be, crushing. So that's a great point. Thank you for that. I'd like to transition out to question number 4. Now, in your business and what you do, that seems like, 5,000 doors, 35,000 tickets, so much going on. How do you balance your business and what you do for a living and your life, your family life, your friends, family, things of that nature? What does that look like? And how can people try to replicate that?
And this is more dad advice that I got. So this is heavily influenced by dad here. It should never be a choice between family and work, right? That's not a choice I should ever have to make. And if I'm working for an employer that asks me to make that choice, in other words, there's what, 40, 50, 60 hours a week that I'm dedicating to my job, that I'm doing all those things, right? And that time is theirs, and I'm going to put forth, 100% effort in that time. But outside that time, whatever those hours are, that's family time, and that's sacred time, and I need to put forth all the effort there. The end of the day, work exists in as much as it helps me and my family, right? And so if work life is not going to be congruent with the goals of me and my family, I need to make a change to my work life, not to my family, if that makes sense. I've known over the years, some of the most successful, wealthiest people that I've known have been some of the least happy. And I think that there's a tie there, because at some point in their career, they made the wrong choice. They prioritized profits over people. And I think if you do that long enough, it catches up with you, because you start making other sacrifices. You start making other choices, and you blink and it's 10 years later and you realize you've missed out on so much, or you've allowed yourself to become someone that you never intended to become. And how do you become that? Well, at some point, back in your past, you started making little decisions that you probably told yourself were for your family. It was a sacrifice for your family. But in reality, it's probably more of a selfish gain. It was, I'm doing this for my family, but when you stop and look at it, you were probably doing it for yourself. And you're, tell yourself that, hey, I'll make more money and that'll be good for my family. Well, the bottom line is, if you can spend more time with your kids, especially when they're young, that's worth way more than money. You've got little kids. I've got teenagers now, and even in this event, like coronavirus, as devastating as it's been to the economy, I've been able to work from home, and it's been a blessing to be able to spend that extra time with. I've got 3 teenagers. That can be hectic and chaotic at the same time, and fun challenges as you're testing boundaries, whatever that may be. But you know how that goes.
Oh yeah.
But being able to spend that extra time with them has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun. So you really can't stress enough how important family is. I know a family therapist, and she told me at one point that someone could develop an entire practice around helping wealthy people who made that wrong choice and prioritize their career over their family, because they're very, very successful, but in their personal life, it's a dumpster fire and they're unhappy and they don't know how to find happiness. And so I think you've got to make that choice and just decide early on, this is a priority for me. This is a principle for me, that family comes first. Let everything else fall where it will.
I would agree to that. I mean, being somebody who first retired when he was in his, I guess, late 20s, early 30s, and retirement, I had enough money to live off of ramen noodles and pay my mortgages for my real estate investments.
Hey, that's the good life right there.
Yeah. Being able to do that was great, but not having, I wasn't married at the time, didn't have a kid. All my friends, were obviously working because we're in our mid 20s. It's no fun. It's you can't really, not having anyone, who cares if you have all the coolest things and coolest places in the world if you have no amazing people to share it with. So I would definitely echo that same statement. So I appreciate that. So before I transition back into our 5th question, and one of my favorite questions, I always like to pause if we have time and give you an opportunity to say, what are the type of clients that you guys are looking for, over there. So if you have that information, I'd love for the audience to hear it.
Yeah. Obviously in property management, it's investors, owners of residential real estate. They're looking for a good management company. And so we do both single family and multifamily. So we manage a lot of apartment complexes and a lot of single family homes. And we do a good job of it. Obviously we're large in scope, much larger than what we used to be. And you've got to be doing a few things right to continue to grow. Sales is one thing in property management, but if you're bringing in 10 clients and losing 20, you're not going to grow. And so being able to grow, it's as much about being able to bring new owners in, but it's also about keeping your existing owners happy. And in property management, that's not always easy. And there's some difficult paths to navigate at times. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. So let's turn to the final and 5th question. And this is the one question that if I get to it when I'm interviewing somebody, I never change. Because I think it's really that, 1 or 2 nuggets that you get to take away. This may be one of those. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give a person looking to get into the property management field in today's ever-changing business environment?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it's a great industry. Probably the biggest piece of advice is, I don't know if it's so much of advice or more of a qualifier or disqualifier, is you've got to have thick skin. And by that, I mean, you're often put in a position where you're between a rock and a hard place. You've got an investor and owner on the one hand, and they've got goals and things that they're trying to achieve. And on the other hand, you've got a tenant and they've got needs and things that they're trying to achieve. And sometimes those are incongruent, and you're stuck right in between those two very important parties that are both very important to your daily business. And trying to keep both of them happy and to meet their needs at the same time, it can be difficult. And there's times where you're going to be unfairly criticized, and you've got to find a way to accept that with grace and not take it personally, and find ways to deliver value for someone who may be mad at you. And that's not always easy. I think it's easy for most of us to be nice to people that are being nice to us, But in property management, sometimes you're having to be nice to people that are not being very nice to you. And if that's a deal breaker for you, it might not be the best industry.
Well, I think that's a perfect piece of advice, because I think any business that's out there, you're going to have thick skin to deal with your clients, your vendors, the government,
Yeah.
So I think that's a great piece of advice. And Mac, I wanted to thank you so much for being the guest for our episode number 7. I want to shoot a real quick recap of the 4 major takeaways I got from what you said. The first one, and probably the one that really stuck out to me the most, was little changes over time can create big change. So as a business owner out there, don't be afraid to start taking those little steps, those little nudges, those little changes in your activity to get to that big thing. Because we all know that one big thing in front of you, like moving a boulder, seems unrealistic, but you can move some pebbles. Take risks, especially when you're younger. It's a great opportunity to learn and fail fast. Family always needs to come first, and I would definitely back that. I think that's kind of the overarching fact of why we're here on this planet, is to build a family and build friends, and work is to supplement that process, not to overtake it. And the last one we just touched on was the thick skin. I think any entrepreneur or business leader or person needs to know that they're going to have to deal with that. Would that be a good recap of kind of what we just chatted about, Matt?
I'd say that's fair. That's a great recap. You
Very
probably
nice.
paraphrased it better than I said it.
I don't know about that, but we'll take it from there. Well, thank you everyone for listening to the Boise Business Podcast, episode 7. Once again, where we interview local business leaders like Mac and get his real world feedback and his processes and how he runs his business. I am your host, Reese Phillips, and thank you all for being with us today. Once again, this episode was sponsored by my business, Preferred Senior Benefits, where I help seniors understand Medicare health insurance needs. Mac, thank you once again for your time. We really do appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me on, Reese. I appreciate it.